In 1995, deep in a national forest in Arizona, campers and drivers alike were terrorized by a monster on the backroads. A monster made of metal. This is the story of a truck driver who snapped for seemingly no reason and went on a high speed rampage of terror on the backroads in a national forest. A story that ends with more questions and unsolved mysteries than answers, as well as with a skull being found years later. The story began on May 25th, 1995, when two campers had their quiet and calm morning in the forest interrupted by the sound of something huge rumbling down the nearby roads coming in the direction of their campsite. The two campers came out of their tent only to see a huge 10-ton 18-wheeler emerge from a mini dust storm it was creating, blowing its horn wildly and blow past them at an extremely high speed. It passed alarmingly close to them and was gone again as quickly as it came, its rumbles fading away down the road. Before they could even comprehend what they had just seen, an 18-wheeler on those roads was as alien of a thing to see as a cruise ship sitting in the desert would be. They heard the rumbling coming again. The truck was coming back, and just like before, it blew right past them at an extremely fast speed, pelting them with rocks and leaving them in a cloud of dust as it rumbled away again. But the terror of that day was just beginning. It came back again, and it was not the only time the monster would do it either. The huge truck kept coming back. It just kept coming, passing by their campsite over and over and over again. Driving with reckless abandon on roads too small and narrow for such a huge vehicle. These roads running through the national forest were gravel and dirt roads, so narrow 2 cars would have a hard time passing, but this 18-wheeler was taking up the whole road and then some. And since it was driving not only on roads too narrow for it, but at such a reckless speed, it only seemed a matter of time before someone or a vehicle was hit head-on by it. The driver seemingly didn't care if he killed anybody. He just kept blowing up the back roads running through the national forest at a high speed for the whole morning. People and cars on the road had to jump out of the way or swerve off the road to avoid being hit head-on by this huge truck bearing down on them like some hungry monster. The driver just seemingly didn't care if he killed anybody. The two campers who saw all this start were Jack and Lynn Yarrington, and compared to what happened to others that day, they were lucky. They only had to watch this huge truck drive at high speeds on the roads too small for it, passing several times but not close enough to strike them, but others had much closer encounters with it. The roads are not that passable by that large of a vehicle. Usually most of the vehicles we have up there are 4-wheel drive, Lynn Yarrington said about the event. That day, in the Tonto National Forest, hikers and campers were terrorized by a monster. It was like the movie Duel come to life in the worst way possible. A giant metal monster being driven by someone eyewitnesses said didn't seem to be seeing anything or anyone that he was almost running down. Other campers said it almost ran them over, and the driver never slowed or seemed to notice them even as they dove out of the way of the truck. In another incident, some campers were driving around a blind spot in the road when the truck came barreling around the blind spot at extremely high speed and the driver made no move to slow down. Those in the SUV saw this huge vehicle come around the corner and bear down on them, coming closer and closer and making no move to stop. It just kept coming at a high speed towards them. They were just able to reverse their SUV and drive backwards down the road, all the while the truck was still coming, until they came to an open spot with no rocks or trees where they could back off the road and get out of the way before the truck hit them head on. It then just passed by and kept going down the road, leaving a cloud of dust behind and continuing its reign of terror. Those driving the SUV described the driver as just staring straight ahead, with no expression on his face, looking right past, or rather, through them. He didn't seem to notice anyone who was in front of him, no matter how close he came to running them over. And this continued throughout the morning. This truck just continued running up and down these narrow back roads in the National Forest at this extreme speed without making any move to stop or even slow down. Lynn Yarrington's description corroborated the SUV driver's description. He never looked at them, as if he recognized there was someone there. There was no expression on his face at all. He didn't attempt to slow down or look over to see if they needed help or anything. He just kept going. Later in the day, a family who were going to have a picnic in the national forest stumbled upon the 18-wheeler. It was stranded in a field deep in the forest, and the driver was just standing next to his vehicle. The group might have left their vehicle. Different retellings describe this exact moment differently. But one way or another, be it on foot or still in their vehicle, they did approach the truck, and one of them, Charles Hall, very cautiously approached the man, kinda bracing for anything, and asked if he needed help and how he got his truck stuck in the mud. The driver only replied, "They made me do it." Charles then asked him what he meant by that, and the driver replied, "No, you can't help me out. I'll never get out of here. I'm going to jail." Obviously, the mention of going to jail was concerning to Charles. Now he was really put off and prepared for this guy to maybe attack him. He thought something like a carjacking had happened, or even a jailbreak that resulted in a kidnapping or hostage situation. He wondered to himself if someone else wasn't also inside the truck, holding the driver against their will, or if the driver might have been holding someone inside against their will. He was also worried that the driver was secretly armed. The driver made no move to attempt to ask Charles or his group for help. He just kept standing next to his stuck truck, that blank expression still on his face. He also made no attempt to stop the group from backing away. The last words he said to the group were, "I'm going to jail." Charles later said about the situation that, "I envisioned a hostage situation, a hijacking, kidnapping, whatever, a jailbreak maybe, and someone had a gun on someone in the cab. He made no effort to keep us there, no effort to ask for help, do anything for him." Jack and Lynn now re-enter this story as well. In the afternoon of the day after they saw the truck go by their campsite over and over, they were driving down Forest Service Road 321, and they came upon the driver standing off the side of the road just inside the trees. He was kneeling on the ground staring at a tree with a $20 bill in his hand, and he was hitting it with a rock, in the way you would if you were trying to start a fire with two stones. Strike one, make sparks. And then he said, "I gotta light the grill." The grill apparently was the flat rock lying in front of him. The couple, who as far as we know had been the first to be baffled and probably mildly terrorized by the truck on the back roads the day before, when it, nearly ran over their tent, were a little put off by the odd sight. They saw no evidence that the driver had a grill or food he'd be cooking if he even got a fire going. So why was he trying to start one, they wondered. Suddenly, the driver whipped around and threw a rock at their car, and they sped off. This was the last time the driver, Devin Williams, was ever seen. No searches that were conducted ever found him. So now we come to the question of, who was Devin Williams? Jumping back in time to the Saturday before his rampage, Devin had been phoning his headquarters. He was a truck driver, and truck drivers have tight schedules to keep when it comes to deliveries. And Devin was no exception to this tight schedule. Deliveries are particularly tight when it comes to food deliveries, and Devin was hauling food on this trip. When his truck was found, the cargo of 1,200 boxes of lettuce and strawberries were undisturbed, with the refrigeration unit still running. This phone call was the last time he talked to his HQ. In this phone call, he complained to his boss about being unable to get any sleep, but he was also determined to get back on the road. This was a westward route that he knew well, and he'd left home for the trip, and all seemed to be normal. This phone call was on Saturday evening. Sunday morning was when his truck was barreling down the backroads in the Tonto National Forest, miles away from any highway, much less the one he was on. Apparently, exhausted and sleep-deprived, he unleashed this rampage for hours on end without stopping, almost driving as if he was on autopilot or in a trance of some kind. Devin's wife, Mary Lou, is convinced to this day that something happened to her husband. He had no reason to go off the deep end in her eyes. They had just purchased a home, and she said it was the happiest point of their marriage up until that point. They were even arguing over what they should put on the floor, tile or carpet. She also said he would never go off his route, let alone act so irrationally. She also adamantly believes that he did not fake the whole thing to run off and start a new life, a theory that some people initially had. She added he was always eager to come home to his family. That Saturday, when Devin made his call, he was in Kingman, Arizona. His destination was Kansas City, Missouri. But for reasons that we've covered, he never made it. And his boss didn't even know until the place Devin was supposed to deliver to called and asked why their delivery had never arrived. It and Devin never made it out of Arizona. Devin's boss said that in the last call, Devin sounded perfectly normal. There was nothing to make him suspect anything was wrong. Everything indicated it was just a very normal trip in the time frame, and everything was going good, Devin's boss said on Unsolved Mysteries. Devin had also always passed his drug tests. It is not seen as very likely that he was on any kind of drug during his attack on the Backroads. Roads, by the way, that were not only very isolated and too small for his truck, but also hard to have even gotten onto with such a large vehicle, and it makes you wonder why in his frenzy he singled this place out. Did he just drive randomly until he ended up in the National Forest? What happened to him between that phone call Saturday evening and that morning when he was driving like a maniac on the roads? So what happened next? Law enforcement authorities and Forest Service FPO personnel descended upon the clearing where the truck was now sitting abandoned. Now, I work in a national forest, for the Forest Service even, and some of our roads, to say they are narrow is an understatement. So I know how baffled I'd be to see a truck sitting in such a place. Like, if I saw a truck at, say, the Georgia Tower, I'd just be baffled. You couldn't get an 18-wheeler up that road. Heck, in places it's hard to get a normal vehicle up that road. And those are the kinds of roads that run through national forests, including the Tonto, especially isolated ones, which this one had plenty of. So everyone was baffled. I get the kind of a confusion that these authorities no doubt had on how a truck came to be abandoned so far in the national forest. When Devin never made his delivery, he was reported as missing. He had not been when the initial discovery of his truck was made by the authorities. And investigators soon linked Devin to the man who had left his truck abandoned on the Tonto after the attack in the national forest. Eyewitnesses said the man was Devin when they were shown pictures of him. Deputy Dean Wells was leading the investigation, which began when he followed up on a report of a 48-foot-long 18-wheeler left in the field in the forest. As I said, the truck's cargo was intact and accounted for, but the driver, Devin, was nowhere to be seen. Inside of the cab, which was locked when the investigators first arrived, it was clean and maintained and seemed well cared for, and there was no evidence of a kidnapping, foul play, or any other kind of foul play being involved with the driver's sudden and terrifying attack. And even though Devin was said by people who knew him not to be the type of man who would abandon a fully loaded truck, this truck that terrorized people was now indeed left abandoned deep in the national forest, and it was his. Devin was never found or seen again until 2 years later. Two hikers in the Tonto were hiking on one of the trails when they found a human skull just half a mile from where Devin was last seen, and the dental records proved it was his skull. That area had been searched back when he was missing, but no body was there at the time. What happened to Devin? What made him snap? What caused his death? And how his skull, just his skull mind you, ended up where it was found when the area had been searched after he vanished, meaning it was placed there sometime after the search ended, are all eerie, unsolved mysteries. So that was the story of the truck on the Backroads. My theory is that in his stress and exhaustion, he just suffered a mental break. He couldn't sleep, he was trying to make a delivery on time, and for whatever reason, it just made him go off the deep end. He snapped. It would explain why he was so robotic and expressionless during his terrifying rampage on the isolated backroads of the National Forest. Again, many miles away from the highway. The forest is in an isolated area. And I can believe him running into the forest and dying, but how his skull ended up in an area that was searched for him 2 years later and just the skull, but nothing else, is weird and a really creepy end to this story. It almost feels deliberate. And there are some more out there theories about what caused him to go off the deep end, and driving to the national forest, including aliens, UFO abduction, and even demonic attack. There are some more grounded theories too, and these are where I think the explanation will most likely lie. Heat stroke, that he was somehow sleepwalking the whole time, or that he did take some drug that would keep him awake and was suffering from side effects of it. I think a mental break sounds most likely if you ask me. He was sleep deprived and really stressed about getting his delivery to his destination on time and about missing his sleep window, so I think for whatever reason, it just made him snap. I hope one day his family gets answers. The unknowns of this story are terrible to have weighing on your mind. But that's going to do it for the video. This is a story with no answers. As Robert Stack said in the Unsolved Mysteries episode that covered this story, absolutely nothing adds up. Clues never yield answers. They only raise more and more questions. So tell me what you think happened and what happened to the rest of his body, and I'll see you in the next video. Check out more spooky stories in the description, and have a good one. Thank you for watching.